started the season with the Wolfpack and why Kako has been bouncing around the bottom six and not the top six. And I know that some Ranger fans were getting frustrated with why Lindgren started the season with Hartford. They're bringing these guys along slowly. This is what it's about, and I've said this like a million times on the podcast, but this is what makes me excited. They're doing it the right way. They're not going the old way where they're just putting Manny Malhotra in a position to fail, or Pavel Brendel, Jamie Lundmark. We've seen it time and again. And this is what has Ranger fans excited. I think we'll have those free agents in a couple of years excited to want to come to this team, and it's going to be a destination that a lot of players want to come to, and why I think that this team is going to be a perennial Stanley Cup contender for the next decade, at least, with the way that they're building this thing. So I'm excited. The defense, and even the defense, which we've panned, on this show all year long, and we've said that it improved, but you're looking at the young guys coming up, and Lundqvist, and then Condre Miller. I mean, the reports from camp, over the last week and a half, he's been phenomenal. That Coach Quinn is talking just about how mature he is, thinking the game and seeing the game, sort of before the play happens. And when you see a player like that out there, you got something. It's not just the skill level that he brings. It's the mental aspect of the game where he's seeing the play and he knows what's going to happen. I mean, that stuff, that's just innate. You can't teach somebody that stuff. You either have it or you don't. And from the initial impressions that you're getting, that Quinn is talking about, he has that. So, the defense, which may be, a negative now or a weak spot, it is going to be a strength within the next 2 years because Condre Miller is going to be there, because Niles Lundqvist is going to be there. So, and you're going to lose a player like Stahl, and I always have to preference everything by saying Stahl was a warrior for this organization, and was one of the biggest reasons that the team went from 8 years of not being in the playoffs to a playoff team every year. He was a big part of that until injuries really took hold and really destroyed his career. I mean, he was going to be a top defenseman in this league, and it really took that away from him. But I digress. Yeah, the defense is going to be just as strong as the forwards, in another year or two, and this is going to be the team to beat.
It's really a shame that they can't have Miller in this lineup for this tournament.
Yeah, it'll be fun because there's a spot for him. Because
yeah.
they got Brendan Smith in there. I mean, there's a spot for him. I mean, Brendan Smith is in there because there's nobody else. I mean, not putting Hayek back in there. He was a disaster this year. He's not ready. So there was a spot. And, he's been impressing this week. I'm sure Quinn would love nothing more to just put him right next to Trouba, in the game one lineup and
Right.
be more than comfortable with it.
Hey, like I said, days to come. So, and this is fantastic that he's getting this experience, that he's going to be here, with these guys through this thing, in practices and on the sidelines. And that experience alone this is extra stuff, because who knows, if the season continues on, I don't know, who knows if he gets into the lineup or maybe, because, especially for young players, it's a training camp for Miller. There's no doubt about that. So, Coach Quinn can say, hey, it's not a training camp, but it definitely is for Miller here. And this is huge because, this is a different way. So, I mean, this is just a stepping stone for him for next season and the future. So,
it's invaluable experience for him. I mean, he could still end up, starting next season in Hartford. I mean, he's still a young kid and he's got to learn the pro game, but what he's learning now is invaluable. I mean, this is really just everything going on is a tough situation for everybody. And you got to come back after all this time off. But if you could look at some type of positive for any of these players who's really benefiting from it, he's at the top of the list.
I bet you this. He gets a starting spot next year. I don't think he's going to spend any time in Hartford. I really don't.
The only reason I say that is because of how patient the organization has been so far with this, and they could end up doing that. I mean, look, Ryan McDonough started his rookie season down at Hartford too, so it's not the worst thing in the world, but
But this
he'll
is
be
a
pushing
different
for.
situation.
I know they're gonna want him in the starting lineup, but yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, and I would lean absolutely more that he's in the Rangers, opening night lineup than he is in Hartford's opening night lineup. But yeah, I still don't think it's a foregone conclusion. But yeah, I see him in the Rangers opening night lineup for sure.
Woohoo! So much to look forward to, KD.
It's a good thing we started this podcast.
Go Rangers, go, baby.
It's a good thing we didn't start it like 2 years ago and the team was terrible. There was no hope.
We should rename it to the Bandwagon Rangers podcast, featuring the old timers, DeLury and Cuthbert.
They gave up on the team in 2018
franchise,
but they were ready in 2020.
Paulie's driving, Katie's got shotgun. Everybody in the back. Here we go. All right, buddy. So, look, we're winding down this episode here, and again, thanks to everybody who's continuing to listen and download the show every week. We really appreciate it. But your buddy here, Brendan Lemieux, man. So let's talk about the suspension, the 2 games, and what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a lot. I mean, the hit was definitely a suspension-worthy hit. But this is the playoffs now. I would have liked it to have been just one game. I think that's harsh enough, but and I think Lemieux, he's got a game that to me works in the playoffs. It's going to be beneficial in the playoffs. So I think it's going to, hurt not having him in the lineup. Look, he's going to be on the fourth line, and he'll be playing 10 minutes a game. It's not like you're losing Panarin, but I think that he could have, brought some tough minutes, in the playoffs. Remember a couple of years ago when the Rangers, upset the Canadians in 17 the first round. It was Tanner Glass, who had a big game one. And that's what happens in the playoffs. It's those type of plays. Dominic Moore, Brian Boyle, Dan Carcillo that step up in the playoffs, and Brendan Lemieux fits that fourth line grinding role that you need to have that type of guy in your lineup for playoff success. So I think it's going to hurt not having him in 2 games. I mean, in a 5-game series, he's out. He's going to be missing almost 50% of the series. So that's a tough blow for the Rangers. I think they can overcome it. You put in Greg McKegg and your fourth line, isn't all that bad with Howden and Gauthier. So I don't think it's devastating, but I hated to see that he ended up with the 2 games. So we'll see how it plays out. I'm actually interested, just to go back to the Kakko conversation. Like, if he really steps up in the first couple of games, if Quinn would be looking to move him up onto that line with Panarin and Strome, bump Foss back down to where he should be, more in that bottom 6 role, is more of a checking line guy that Quinn can put him out there against, the better teams, or against the better players, especially against the Hurricanes, maybe against Aho and their top line. So I think Kakko playing well, lengthens the lineup a little bit, where you can bump him up, and then you could put Foss in a more beneficial spot as like a defensive forward, putting him out against the Hurricanes top line, when you really need a shutdown there at the end of the game, or whenever it is when you need a big stop. So, just to go back to Lemieux, I think a fourth line, if you put, Foss, Lemieux, and like Howden, I mean, that's, to me, a tremendous fourth line, because you saw Howden may have been a little overwhelmed earlier in the year as, a third line center, but you bump him down to that fourth line, Foss, Lemieux, and, I like that. I think you move Gauthier up to that third line with Heedle and Di Giuseppe, and man, we got a good lineup.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Where did you? I mean, look, I know we both like Lemieux a lot, and he's just a great kid too. He's obviously a big part of the locker room as well. What was your take on his play? You know, maybe towards the end there, or just maybe if you can just think back on the season for him. He's obviously got skills. He's had shining moments. They weren't, again, ice time is huge. Obviously, when your ice time is limited for a player like him, your chances to make an impact as far as on the score sheet are few and far between. Obviously, it's less of an opportunity. But as far as the discipline, and I don't know how much you don't want Brendan to change too much. But what's your take in terms of him sticking around on this team, having a position, and maybe because he might be interchangeable to bop back and forth on a third line down the road as well too. I don't know if he just needs to be just set on the fourth line. But where do you see him evaluating him last season in terms of the long-term plans of this team? Do you think he's going to make it here? Do you think he showed signs of maturing a little bit? What do you think of his game, and where do you see him beyond this tournament, and in terms of maybe keeping a role here with this team?
I thought actually he had a very disappointing season this year. I expected more from him offensively and also as an agitator. And I always hold everybody to the Sean Avery sort of standard, for guys in that role, where it should be a constant sort of agitation. And I don't think he did that enough this year, where he was getting the other team off their game, whether it's chirping them, whether it's a little bump, after the whistle, a snow shower in the goalie's face, that kind of thing. I just don't think he did that enough. And I expected more of that from him. And also, after the Rangers had traded for him, he showed a little offensive pop there, and that didn't continue this year. So I would say overall, like in theory, like I love Lemieux, like I love his game and what he brings. Again, I love those type of Sean Avery, Dan Carcillo, type players where, they're chirping all game. They can pop some goals when necessary. They have skill, but they're also can play a little bit of a bruising style. So I didn't see enough of any of that from Lemieux this year. So I think that this playoffs is big for him. And if he continues to disappoint when he does get in, if and when he does get in, because I don't think he's guaranteed a spot when he comes back out, depending on how the team is doing, next season will be huge for him. Because if he does have another season similar to this year's, he can find himself not on the team at the end of this year. Because, again, with the way this team is rebuilding, and it's sort of been accelerated a bit because of how you've seen players progress, and you got a guy like Panarin and Zibanejad and Kreider. I mean, next year is we need to be in the playoffs and make a little noise type year. And if he's a guy who's not producing, they're going to say, we're going to find somebody who can, whether it's in that kind of agitating role, or maybe they look to say, look, we just need some more skill on the fourth line. We need some more scoring, and you're not bringing that either. So, sorry, you're just not cutting it here. So I think that this playoff, and again, if and when he does get in, and if he doesn't, or if he doesn't step up, I think next year is a make or break year for him.
Well, a couple of things that you said with regards to things that you were disappointed with him in terms of what he didn't bring that you would have liked to have seen him do a little more of this year. Now, we don't know if the coaching staff might have put the reins on him, wanted him to play a certain way. Maybe he had to change his game this year. That's one aspect of it too, because the system was changing, and for really a bulk of the whole season, me and you were going back, what system are they playing? You know